the Director CIL to say a few words.
Namaskar,
Yes.
welcome. Professor Kakali Mukherjee, today's guest of honor, and Professor Padma Shri, Professor D.P. Patnaik, sir, our mentor. My esteemed colleagues at CIL and friends, I take this opportunity to extend our warm welcome to Professor Kakali Mukherjee, who is present here to speak on language documentation, language endangerment and documentation in India, some realities. We know that this topic is great interest for all of us at Institute of India as well as in India, and it is a great privilege and great pleasure and privilege for all of us to listen to Kakali Madam on this occasion of 53rd Foundation Day lecture series organized by Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore. This is the 35th edition of the lecture series, and I must thank Professor Umarani for conducting this 35 lecture for the whole year. In this lecture, in these lecture series, we got an opportunity to listen to scholars all over the world working on the linguistic aspects of Indian languages, language and linguistics. And for this, I must congratulate Professor Umarani for completing the lecture series successfully, the 35th in nature. We know that CIL is committed to work on all Indian languages, be it scheduled languages, non-scheduled, endangered, and other languages of India, and language documentation is an important part in our CIL's objective. My understanding that in Indian context, we are still working on the language description mode, and we do not put more emphasis perhaps on primary dicta, that is recorded audio, video with annotated text. I think we need to emphasize the role of technology in language documentation efforts on languages of India, and especially the endangered languages in India. We know that endangered languages in India also have many facets. Many Indian languages which are unwritten and spoken by a very small number of speakers, yet these languages are very vibrant, thriving languages. At the same time, on the other hand, many languages with social capital and big speaker base, but still not transmitting those languages to the next generation. So today's lecture will guide us on language endangerment issues and also the realities of language documentation in India. Once again, we are thankful to Professor Kakali Mukherjee for sharing her valuable time with us. And I also welcome our friends, colleagues to this talk. Welcome, Professor Patnaik, sir. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Shailendra Mohan, for your important beginning of this 35th lecture. I once again welcome Professor Kakali Mukherjee on behalf of Central Institute of Indian Languages, where she started her career in 1980s or even earlier maybe. I don't know the exact time. So it's a very emotional moment for all of us to have Professor Dr. Patnaik with us when Kakali Mukherjee is going to present her lecture. See, we have been organizing several lectures, but this is the first time we have someone in this particular 53rd Foundation Day lecture series who is going to talk about her experiences on our sister government organization, the language division, Kolkata. So because we have heard many lectures or talks by academicians from other institutions. So now it is our privilege to have you with us, Dr. Mukherjee, to speak on language documentation efforts that is being done at the Language Division, Kolkata for several decades. Before you begin your lecture, I would like to introduce you to this august audience. Dr. Mukherjee started her career in Kolkata. She is a gold medalist in her master's degree and also has a PhD from University of Calcutta. Like I mentioned in the beginning, she started her career with us at the Central Institute of Indian Languages. He's a CIL alumni appointed by Dr. Patnaik as a lecturer in Bengali at different places, of course, in the beginning in Bhubaneswar. She practiced applied linguistics in our institute by teaching Bengali language and the linguistics part of it to non-native teacher trainees across India. Later, she moved further to practice several aspects of linguistics, descriptive linguistics, structural linguistics, documentation, geolinguistics under the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India for several decades. Under the post-Griersonian Linguistic Survey of India, the LSI, the new LSI as it is being called by the Government of India, she coordinated several projects and was responsible in bringing out monumental publications of LSI Rajasthan, LSI Bihar. We are very happy and proud of your contributions in bringing out descriptive grammars of Bhotia, Tibetan, Marwari, Malpaharia, and several languages in LSI Sikkim and these other regions what I just mentioned. She was also the key person in planning, designing, and implementation of another important project, which is named as Mother Tongue Survey of India. Many of us had got an opportunity to work with her in this project in several capacities. She was collaborating with several universities across the country, including institutions like CIL. We also were happy to host her in Northeastern Hill University, Nehu, for several workshops where we had collaborated with her for more than 100 languages reports we have been submitting to her. She has contributed to the consolidation of several grammars of Adi, Vandamanis, Vishnupriya Manipuri, Porku, Kirati, Thado, and many more languages belonging to the major language families of our country. Besides this, as you know, since language division is involved in census operations, she was also responsible for supervising and coordinating many census reports, including the language census of 2011, which has been published. Of course, all of us have some access to the public documents. Now she's happily retired from the regular government assignments and she superannuated several years ago, but she's still active and engaged in linguistic studies and various language activities of our country. She also is part of our Linguistic Society of India and office bearer. She is a joint secretary and also a working secretary for this tenure. She has been awarded with several awards. She had 2 silver medals and Order of Merit from President of India, 2001 and 2011. It's indeed a great pleasure to have with us today an eminent scholar, Professor Kakali Mukherjee. I once again welcome you on behalf of our institute and request you to deliver your speech. I also welcome the audience who are here because without you, this lecture series would be meaningless. Thank you so much for your support as always.
Should I start?
Yes, please. Manohar, can you share the slides? Pages, Manohar, I don't know who is doing. So.
Thank you, Professor Umarani. Actually, it is Umarani only. She projected me in such a manner which really I do not know whether I deserve all these qualities and qualifications she attributed. So I am so thankful to Professor Umarani, and as a professor and deputy director in centrally the esteemed institution of the India, the Apex institution, so far the language studies concerned in India. So I expressed my heartful gratefulness to Professor Umarani for keeping me in such a good place and providing me such an opportunity. So now I offer my thanks and regards to Director Shailendra Mohanji, so allowing me to speak. I don't know whether at all deserving or not. Anyway, both of you called me, and I will try to satisfy you at my level best. So my regards and respect for my wholehearted respect, regards, honor, and everything for our guru, that Professor Dr. Patnaik, who is always inspirer and who has worked. I have worked with him last few years back also, sitting with him in his residence, in his study table. So my awe and regards, it is limited. My words are limited to express that. So I'm bowing my head to Professor D.P. Patnaik, who is always a source of inspiration and encouragement to the linguists of the country. My honors, respect, and regards for all the listeners who are listening and participating in this lecture, and my heartful regards for all the CIL colleagues. Though I am not here, but still I regard them who worked in past and who are presently working also. They are all my colleagues. So I offer my best regards and honor to all of them, to enter CIL, including Professor Patnaik. So I was now, let me come to the point for which both Sailandraji and Professor Umarani ji created this platform. They provided me an opportunity to speak in this esteemed lecture series, that Foundation Day 53rd Foundation Day lecture series. I never imagined that I'll be speaking in such a glorious platform. Anyway, I have been given opportunity, so I'll try to carry it out. So this is a thing that I have been rather initiated under the initiation of Professor Umarani. I took up, I agreed that I will be talking something. Of course, the write-up which I am going to present to you has been improved by her, and many points has been added by her also. So I am very much thankful from that point of view also. So now let me start with my topic, which I have given that and today's lecture series in the 35 lectures under the 53rd Foundation Day lecture series. So the topic is the language endangerment and documentation in India, some realities. So it is a very known word. This in the present decade, since the last decade of the last century, it has started. The endangerment, language endangerment has attracted view and attention of all sets of linguists. And so India is also a part of that. And India, Central Institute of Indian Languages and Ministry of Home Affairs, Office of the Registrar General of India, so in collaboration, both the institutions have started working in the beginning of the present century, the 21st century, language endangerment and documentation in India. So without the support and without the guidance and supervision of the CIL, ORGI, Office of the Registrar General India, could not start this project, Mother Tongue Survey of India, which is operating from the beginning with this new technology, with the new tools, with the new methodology, which CIL has enlightened and taken the Office of the Registrar General India into that modernity or this technological improvement. So with that, with offering these things, I am starting my slides today. The first slide is the reality of languages of the world. It is all known. It is known to everybody by the esteemed ethnologue that the number of the living languages in present world is about 7,000, more than 7,000. But the more the number, the dying of the languages also is more faster. So the languages are dying at a faster rate than before. And there is so many reasons for that, that globalization is the main factor. So entire world is trying to come under one umbrella. And for this coming under one umbrella, this is a hard task. For this, we are losing, mainly for this, we are losing every day some languages, some language and some language. So this number of living languages is more than 7,000 as per Ethnologue 2022. And languages are dying also at a faster rate. And it is a prediction by the linguists that by the end of the 21st century, that in the world, instead of 7,000, more than 7,000 language, this world may have only 700 languages at the end of this century, if the language death continues at this rate. Based on the criteria, endangered languages, next slide, based on the criteria developed by UNESCO in 2003, the UNESCO Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger in 2010 brought out by Mosley, where he mentioned that 2,471 languages are endangered languages in the world. And out of this 2,471 languages of the world, 197 languages are from the India, which are the spoken languages. The Ethnologue 2022 further lists that 2,055 living languages are to be troubled by the end of the century, and 990 languages are dying, and 349 languages are already extinct. This is as per the statistics or as per the report of the Ethnologue 2022. So this number of endangerment is keeping this number of languages keeps changing by this endangerment, and the fact is languages is dying faster than before. So next slide, the emergence of documentation. In the light of this ongoing language death as discussed, the documentation of language emerges as a major agenda in linguistics. Documentation can save the languages both in India, across India. This save the languages from permanent loss in general and partially from the language shift. Because as I told, by the effort of the globalization, by the grace of the globalization, we are shifting towards a language which will be very useful in our day-to-day for our day-to-day survival. So these also makes a language shift, and by this way we are sometimes going for the language, we are going into the language loss also. Documentation thus can protect multilingualism, language maintenance of a linguistically diverse area. So next slide is, what is now this language documentation in the context of linguistic diversity? So linguistic diversity, as we all know, it is nothing new, that linguistic diversity is the existence of diverse languages in a single area or place. And this is the diversity of languages which is the source of multilingualism in a place, in an area, in a state, in a country, or the world. This diversity only invites and indulges the conception of language documentation, and thus language documentation emerges as a major agenda in the field of linguistics in the current century, considering the endangerment of languages as well as endangerment of linguistic diversity too. Next slide. So the basis of language diversity. We come across many languages and cultures across the world. Many of them are still unknown to the majority of the world. Languages are diverse with phylogenetic diversity consisting of structural diversity. According to the structural, the language grouping, the language affiliation under the different family, and the phylogenetic diversity of the languages are established. So diversity in language thus is bonded with diversity in culture. Since a culture is there, we have to express the items of that culture through our language. So long culture is there, so long language also will be there. So language lose one, we language lose means we lose one culture also. So diversity in language is highly bonded with the diversity in culture. Now we may come to the documentation in general. Documentation in general, it is known, again, it is known to everybody. It is general is the record of information collected through the data. That means the data is the content of any sort of documentation. Thus, documentation refers to a kind of material which serves the purpose of a record for providing authenticated information and fact about concerned object. Obviously, concerned object means obviously language, different aspect of language. So documentation is a very powerful platform, is a very powerful instrument to keep alive the language and the facets of the language, aspects of the language, along with language, the cultures of the society. So this is the contribution of the documentation. That's why it is so highly considered as an important linguistic attribute in the present world. The area of language documentation. Overall documentation by audiovisual recording and retrieving of information regarding language structure, free vocabulary, and the use or function of the particular language in different societal domains. It is the primary area of the language documentation. Thus, language documentation is related with the discipline of linguistics primarily and other related interdisciplinary subjects such as anthropology, folklore, cultural studies, etc. Because language studies is related with all these things, because we express a culture through a language, through anthropology, we express the oral tradition, written tradition we document the oral tradition, written tradition of a language. So folklore as well as the written tradition and the spoken norm as well as cultural studies are all at the area of language documentation. Now coming to the scope of language documentation, multimodal documentation is one of the activities that can help us to prevent such language loss and aid in revitalization, because we started that we are losing languages very fast. And documentation, the entire concept of documentation has emerged from that sense of losing language. So to prevent that language loss, multimodal documentation is the first instrument. Language documentation in this way is a long-lasting, multi-purpose, digitized record of human language and human culture. Language documentation has become a great challenge to the India, and many researchers and many linguists, many institutions, and all the universities of the current India are involved in documenting the languages and cultures of India. So naturally, the scope of language division involves the objectives of language documentation. So language documentation is related primarily, as it is spoken, already discussed, that language documentation is related primarily with recording of spoken language or speech with definite target of maintaining lasting record of that specific language. Spoken language, spoken speech specimen is primarily we focus, but the written this treasury, if it is available to us, we can document with translation and annotation. This documentation requires, the documentation requires the definite methods of recording to be accompanied with tools and technologies of recording of specific or overall data of language, the expertise of linguists and other subjects. So this documentation requires a huge infrastructure. Without a huge infrastructure, this documentation cannot be a successful document. that for this documentation, if this objective is to cover the languages in this way, so some tools are also very much used and useful in language documentation. And these tools are the language data covered serves as the lasting record of a natural language and its varieties. Data is captured in the line of survey, keeping survey tools and templates as the basis of survey. These are the basic tools. So these survey tools and survey templates. Survey tools include appropriate machineries or gadgets, questionnaires, both guided and free. And more or less, the most important things is conducive environment for recording speech sound. The sound where it will be recorded, that area, that room, that space, that spot should be selected in such a manner that the incessantly a good recording can take place without any outer disturbance, without any outer hustle and bustle. So conducive environment for recording speech sound, and the logistics, it is the main thing, the logistics with the knowledge of technical operation of the gadgets. But the more important thing is with whom this documentation can be done, that is the main speakers. So documentation involves the speakers of the target language community, which is one of the principal tools used in language documentation. The stages of language documentation. Now, once the tools are within our pocket, starts the stages of language documentation. The stages of language documentation involves recording of audiovisual guided language data covering all these things, all registers existing in a society, like nature, this animal's body parts, the structure, our foods, our plants, our flora, fauna, our kinship terminologies, our medicinal terminologies, and our all words used in different domains of the society, including education, mass media, literature, school, college, everything. So our war, our victory, our politics, these are all different register. So the words of all this register has to be covered by this audiovisual technology. So capturing of, and that capturing of the audiovisual record, it is always, it cannot be infinite. It can be guided because infinity has no limit. So for the documenting the language and getting the language into our fold, so it should be guided. So that's why I talked that survey tools is very much required, which is a questionnaire. So, but beyond the questionnaire also, the capturing of free materials also as existing in the language, that also will be documented, like jingles, storytelling, lullaby, riddles, fairy tales, traditions, customs of existing cultural phenomena, and the terminologies used in different customs and rituals, and anything and everything existing in a language. That is the stages of language division. Recording is the first stage of language documentation. Then comes, once the recording it's completed, then comes the stage, the systematic data organization by data transferring, editing, and backup. This also requires the huge technology. The transcription after this data organization stage is covered, then you have to come to the linguistic part with the documented material. What is that linguistic part? Transcription of the captured or recorded audiovisual linguistic data using International Phonetic Alphabet or appropriate linguistic software. Analysis or transcribed language data for grammatical or structural description of the target language following the device templates, because there is also some limitation should be there, because a language description is a huge, it has so many areas of a language in a language. But if we go on doing all this linguistics works, there will be no end of the description, there will be no end. So we have to make our world of linguistic description a limited as per my documentation experience. So translation of free materials and cultural technologies along with annotation. After all this thing is done, transcription and analysis of the grammatical description and translation with annotation is complete, then comes the digital archiving stage. The digital archiving or uploading the data and all pervasive structural grammar and description in server, in relevant server for relevant use by the data users or interested person in the documentation result. So now coming, these are the what I talked. It is about the general documentation part. But now let me be specified in my area where I worked. I worked in the Office of the Registrar General, which is a department under the Ministry of Home Affairs of the Government of India. So I'll be sticking to language documentation in that ORGI. In the short form, I'll be mentioning, referring ORGI. So ORGI under Ministry of Home Affairs of the Government of India has been assigned with the operation. Operation means operation of the census, tabulation, compilation, and dissemination of decennial census data. This dissemination of decennial census data, it includes the language mother tongue data also, which is the component of the socio-cultural data of the country. Now coming to the basis, we are coming to the basis of language census, because since we are talking on the language documentation, so it is this what is language documentation is related with solely and wholly with the language census. So now let me talk on the basis of language census. India is the composition of innumerous mother tongues which get returned during decennial census enumeration, including a good number of spurious names. It is not that all the names which the respondents are returning, these are all logical names or sensible names. There are some spurious names also, but a huge number of mother tongues are returned during census enumeration. And these huge number of mother tongue returns are walked through and exercised for arriving at the language mother tongue statistics in Census of India. And these authenticated statistics of the language mother tongue returns is the principal source of data about the multilingual India and the pluricultural India. Language census result thus establishes the record of language or mother tongues in India in every 10 years. So this is the basic of language census. Now how the language census is coming to the light of public domain. This is the thing that innumerous mother tongues returns during census enumeration, which is obtained through canvassing of the two questions, because this returns means in response to some definite questions that the household members, they return that this is my mother tongue, so which we are exercising and coming to the final statistics. So this response is against canvassing of the two questions out of more or less 30 questions canvassed in census enumeration. These two questions are one question on mother tongue and one question or the other languages known according to proficiency. A man can be proficient in 4 languages or 5 languages, so he has to record according to proficiency that which is his other languages known to him or her. The huge responses against these two questions get rationalized by eliminating the spurious returns and other factors. Spurious return means nonsensible names. Sometimes people say that in place of their language name, their language mother tongue they'll be talking about their educational qualification, they'll be talking about their business, they'll be talking about their professional name, they'll be uttering about their caste name. So this we treat as the spuriousness, and this spuriousness is eliminated, and the rationalization takes care of the logical returns out of these innumerable huge returns. So the rationalized data are classified after the rationalization of the used data is complete. Then comes the work of the classification of the mother tongues under relevant languages, or grouping of the mother tongue relevantly under relevant languages. So the rationalization data are classified under languages, both scheduled and non-scheduled, following the linguistic principle, methodology, existing knowledge base, and very recently, the survey results of the two ongoing projects of WordGI. I means this documentation in WordGI in the name of the Linguistic Survey of India and the Mother Tongue Survey of India projects, they are taking care of the classification of rationalized mother tongue language names in India. The goals of language documentation of WordGI: to identify the written mother tongue name as a meaningful name with its linguistic autonomy. Because we all know, or if it is not known, it is pertinent on my part to mention that during census enumeration, each household member tries to identify himself with herself with some name, that I am such and such. So they consider it as the linguistic entity. So, but that has to be logicalized, that has to be made sensible. So that's why we call that this rationalized. Rationalized means to identify the rational or logical or sensible names. To ascertain the logical linguistic entity of the return name based on the recorded data or speech specimen. To not only that, after identifying that, to assess the linguistic structure of the identified speech community. So when we are identifying that the logicality with the existence of the speech community, then comes the task of the linguists of the WordGI to assess whether that linguistic community is having their own linguistic structure or linguistic autonomy or not. So that is also the goals of language documentation. This rational and logical mother tongues are grouped or classified under relevant language names, and this is the process of mother tongue rationalization and classification in India census, and documentation is the main source nowadays for this heavy task, and upon which data the entire country stands, along with other source of data too. The release of language census data. With the advancement of the technology as a language documentation, the classification of grouping process, the classification of group or grouping process, various communities through the digitized data. Earlier, when in the manual form, we are going one by one sheet and one by one specimen in this way, so going into the pen and paper the manually, but digitized data is helping us to go to the quick look and quick review, or to the tool of the comparing the structures of the various communities. So it makes the classification process easier. So comparison of structures of the languages and mother tongues builds the basis of rationalization and classification of census returns. The language census result thus processed gets released with the approval of the government of India. It is not that it is so easy. Whatever names we are getting, whatever we are rationalizing, and whatever we are classifying, it is not that the entire world is coming into the public domain. The public domain comes when government of India sees the data and approves the extent. The extent government of India approves the data of language or mother tongue, to that extent is released or given to the public domain. Further necessity of language documentation in WordGI. This is the one part. This is the main part, main task of RGI. But other work, other necessity of language documentation is also there. The language documentation helps to assess the convergence and divergence among the languages in language contact situation, along with the trend of language maintenance and shift. Because language sensors measures the languages spoken consistently in more than 2-3 censuses, and consistently spoken in 2-3 censuses and in a contiguous areas, not in abrupt areas. So that is called the language in proper way, when consistently in 2, 3, 4 censuses, that same languages is written in that area, in contiguously in that area. So that helps to decide that this is the really a linguistic community. And then comes the task of the exercising the convergence and divergence in those languages, because their contiguity gives the picture of the language contact situation. It also helps to ascertain the use of the language in all domains of the society, like intercommunication, education, mass media, judiciary, literature, and other functional use. So apart from the linguistic description, apart from the linguistic existence of the community, apart from the linguistic identification of the written names, so the sociolinguistic use of that particular identified language also is coming under the task of the WordGI, which is also possible, which is also nicely possible by the documentation process. So now comes the logistics of the language documentation. Thus, language documentation for this purpose requires expertise from the discipline of linguistics, from a range of related interdisciplinary subjects. Because we already told that in linguistics, anthropology, folklore, cultural studies, and these technical parts, that is camera, tools, etc. So not only discipline of linguists, is a discipline of other disciplinary subjects are also build the logistics of language documentation. The active participation of the community members whose languages is targeted for documentation or for digitization or getting the appropriate data following the stipulated questionnaire. So these active community members are also the logistics of language documentation. The expertise of linguists, apart from this, the expertise of linguists to transcribe the spoken data, to transcribe the free speech materials, to translate the free speech materials, to transcribe them along with annotation, to analyze the transcribed data for arriving the structure of the target language, all sorts of use of the language mother tongues in society, and also for retention, preservation, and promotion of it. And it will be possible by transcribing the spoken data by the use of this IPA chart or any suitable this modern software, linguistic software. Further, the well-trained cameraman to operate digital camera for capturing audiovisual data, the trained person to transfer the digitized data for suitable and economic backup in hard disk, pen drive, or so. They also build up the logistics of the documentation, and the trained and apt person to upload those digitized raw data, transcribed data, the grammatical description of the language, translated free speech and annotation for archiving in the server. So those trained persons are also the logistics of language documentation. So now, after all this scope, objective, this logistics of the language documentation, now my focus is thus that language documentation is based on decennial language census data with multiple purposes in a multilingual setup like India. And this is the main focus of the WordGI. Language documentation has emerged thus has emerged as a major concern of the language census study in the perspective of rationalization as well as classification of decennial language census data, linguistic diversity, language endangerment, and language revitalization. Language census, then comes the language census data is oriented with thus multiple purposes. The language division under Minister of Home Affairs of the Government of India has been assigned and entrusted with the job of bringing out the language mother tongue statistics in every 10 years, which is exercised through the rationalization and classification of mother tongue returns during decennial census operation. Now the focus of my talk, that is now my experience, drawing upon my experience in the language division under this Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, Honored Minister of Home Affairs of the Government of India, it will be outlined some of the issues and challenges in which has already been involved in such documents. I will be highlighting those. I will be describing the tools and techniques used for these important tasks and emphasize the need to undertake this further language documentation project. Treasury of Indian languages and mother tongues, language endangerment, as I told, is a real threat in today's society, which includes Indian society too. India, being one of the major hotspots of the globe, is the homeland for nearly 1,600 mother tongues. So why this breakup? The 1,600 mother tongues, 1,369 mother tongues have already been rationalized and classified in the latest published census data of 2011. 2021 has not yet come the light of this rationalization and classification. So it's a homeland of nearly 1,600 mother tongue, out of which 1,369 rationalized and classified, and 1,474 unclassified names. And it is a homeland of 121 languages, under which 270 mother tongues of above 10,000 speakers, 10,000 or above speakers, have been grouped as per the latest published census result of 2011 census. This data is arrived through rationalization and classification again, this of mother tongue returns during census of enumeration. So why the language loss? The basic of the language loss in India, due to several reasons such as natural calamity, socio-political factor, economic factor, administrative motivation, many mother tongues of India are becoming the victims of shifting to a dominant language of the region and leading to gradual loss of their own mother tongue. And all these factors are very known to everybody. This India is a river-based country. Very often all natural calamities take place and people are dispersed in several parts. They are spreaded from their own original place to other places. And socio-political, economic, we all know that the prestigious language, the super active language of the particular region, people will be liking that language for use in every aspect of life. And by this preference, we are losing our own language if we are not conscious at all. So all these factors is the reason for the gradual loss of languages in India. This situation demands the preservation of all those languages, not only for language maintenance, but also for promotion. So these are the main purpose that this language documentation is required. Now I am coming directly to the ongoing surveys of ORGI. This ongoing surveys, this linguistic survey of India and mother tongue survey of India, and some other smaller projects are also, but the main major projects are these two projects are the projects of the ORGI, which are operating through language documentation nowadays. The objectives of both the survey is documentation, but there is a point that while Linguistic Survey of India started its journey in the non-digital era in the last part of 20th century, the MTSI has exclusively started its operation in the digital era. That is the main difference between the two projects. And now I am coming to describe the objectives of this important project first and outline the tools used for language documentation. The objectives of both LSI and MTSI projects are different. The object of Linguistic Survey of India is to calibrate the rationalization and classification in more and more authentic manner and update manner by the result of the language documentation. To assess the detailed linguistic and sociolinguistic properties of classified language mother tongues. To operate survey state by state for state specific languages. The basis of selection is the published classified names of the language and mother tongues. So this Linguistic Survey of India covers these main objectives, and by these objectives, we have seen the outcome in this way that we have already published, WordGI has already published 7 volumes in print mode. First one is Linguistic Survey of India Orissa volume, then comes the Dadra and Nagar Haveli volume, then comes the Sikkim volumes of India in 2 parts. And when the first part deals with the 11 indigenous languages of Sikkim, another part exclusively deals with the most populous language of Sikkim, that is Nepali. And I am very proud in stating that this honored Professor Patnaik, who helped us, who only made these volumes to see the light of publication. It is his inspiration that we entirely designed both the volumes of Sikkim State Linguistic Survey of India. And another one is print mode, this Rajasthan volume, one part, which has been this thing designed, or which has been encouraged by who is no more with us, Professor Jagdish Sharma. So he overviewed this Rajasthan volume, and this is also we have printed, and other volumes which are published in our WordGI server. Those are West Bengal LSI volume, Bihar and Jharkhand LSI volumes, and other volumes are in the pipeline of publication in online. So these are the outcome with the expressed objectives of LSI. Objectives of MTSI. So objectives of MTSI is to identify the linguistic autonomy of the rationalized mother tongue names, to identify the unclassified returns, and these objectives is on the basis of the selection of the state-wise lesser described, lesser known or unwritten mother tongue names with all the 6 variables, so with the 6 social variables like age, sex, rural and urban. So with the 6 variables of each mother tongue names, thus of the lesser described, lesser known or unwritten mother tongues, the MTSI has started its documentation with these objectives to identify those mother tongue names. The manpower of LSI, as I told that LSI started its journey in the non-digital era. So in case of one language, one linguist, and for the primary data, one informant, and one informant for the data checking. And what the manpower? The WordGI staff established in different state level, which is called DCO, Directorate of Census Operation, who are involved in coordination in finding out the language informants. So these were the manpower of LSI project up to last century. But the manpower of MTSI is under the, this is very, very interesting, under the supervision and training by the linguists of WordGI, and the training imparted by all the esteemed and august faculties and senior experts of linguistics of different universities and institution, they imparted training to the manpower of MTSI, to a set of linguists to getting the data. Because in the MTSI objective to get the documentation of the language data through a group of non-linguists comprised from the by the NFDC. NFDC means National Film Development Corporation for the shooting purpose. They're the shooting team. And the data elicitation by statistical personnel of state-wise organization of WARGI, that I call that DCO, Directorate of Census Operation, where the statistical personnel under the training of our linguistic experts, they have been able to capture the digitized linguistic data and the variable wise that I told, that 6 variable: age, male, female, and these rural, urban. By this variable wise language informants and interpreters. So why informants? Because to convince the informants and to assist the informants in all activities for data capturing or for data elicitation, data elocution. So then the other manpower is the junior linguists for variable-wise data transcription and analysis drawn from different universities and institutions across India. This is the part of the linguists of the country. And then the most remarkable and this most valuable part of the MTSI manpower is the consolidation of the variable-wise analysis of single mother tongue, the consolidation into a single language report or single mother tongue report by a group of senior linguistic experts or faculties from universities and institutions across India, along with the linguists of WARGI. So these are the world of the manpower for the MTSI project, which was not there in LSI. Survey tools for MTSI: digital camera and HDD, hard drive disk. This questionnaire comprising around 1500 words, comprising all registers as much as possible, and around 500 sentences and free story. And the survey template. These are the survey tools for MTSI. And the outcome of MTSI is that 500 mother tongues that's captured and analyzed are under the process consolidated. 500 consolidated mother tongues, along with the variable wise analysis, are under the uploading process in the server of WARGI, which will be accessed by the linguists or the users on requisition to WARGI. Thus, tools and techniques used since the beginning of the 21st century, the advanced tools and techniques and technologies of language documentation are followed for both the survey projects of the Government of India, LSI and MTSI. Prior to this, prior to 21st century, the WARGI was devoid of this audiovisual documentation technology. LSI was conducted early with the tools like cassettes and cassette recorders, microphone, tapes, etc. And individual linguists. Presently, with exclusively digital technology, now LSI, Linguistic Survey of India, is also operating. But MTSI since beginning involves the present century digitized technology exclusively. So now we are coming to the experiences or problems faced in language documentation. So we have discussed about the goals, objectives, manpower, tools, technology. Now the experience of the problem faced in language documentation. Language documentation received several problems. So far, WARGI of the Government of India is concerned, this problem is concerned with. Of course, I am very humbly, I am telling, this is up to 2016, November end, I was with both the project. So I am talking of the problems at that period, which I came across. Beyond that, it is beyond my knowledge. So I am submitting with this to all of you. The problem is concerned with the lack of standards of techniques and technologies involved in digitization. Then that means, though we talked about a standard camera, standard technology, but in practice it was not maintained. So standard of tools and techniques could not be maintained. And then comes the unrest and undulation of the language informants drawn for the target language. Because this language informant, they do not like to sit for a longer time for the elocution of the data. So their unrest is the main problem in the language documentation. The informants, who are the main pillars of the language documentation of any language or any language research, generally do not feel comfortable with the recording activity for a longer time. Even some informants fly away from the recording or shooting spot out of fear, out of shyness or so. To complete, when one informant leaves the field, the task comes to search another substitute informant, and to complete the residual work through the efforts of the substitute informant, many a time it becomes problematic because the data does not go and checking of data by another informant does show less parity with already collected first set of data, which may be due to over-influence of the interpreters who are engaged by the administrative authorities of local government. So this is the main hazards also, because when we go, because especially when we go to the interior area, so until and unless a local government authorities is with us, we cannot identify the actual language informant. And there the person who is assisting us in the language documentation work, he influences the informant that this is that. This cave means, you don't know, this cave means that. It is told in your language in this way. So the over-influence of the interpreters, it also hampers the digitization or the documentation of language, elicitation of the language by the language informant. The quality of data editing also many times lacks quality. As a result, the uttered sound by the informant become illegible, and transcribers face lots of problems in transcribing the recorded data, because by editing for the compact, this transferring into HDD, the jerkings and other things is hampers the actual language data, and transcriber face lots of difficulties. And by all these things, that actual time schedule cannot be maintained, because everything is limited by time. The time frame is maintained with all these projects. The informant sometimes is seen as creating problem by elocution of erroneous data rather against the question or item of the questioner, which concept does not exist in that society, like food item, relation item, natural item, and so. Suppose I face the problem that the Tibetan people could not utter this sea. What is the Tibetan word for sea? The island. Like this, they could not give me the data. But nowadays, while MTSI is operating by the influence of the interpreter, they are giving, falsifiedly they are giving that this is the data for the Tibet, this island, this is the data for the sea, like this, because that concept is not with the Tibet. So sometimes this problem, this marks the goals and objective of language documentation. Sometimes linguists assigned for transcription analysis lacks accuracy in transcribing the recorded sound, especially in case of non-cognate target languages. This is also, this I should not speak, but if this is not expressed, these linguists who are working in transcribing and analysis, and which builds the pillar of the language description, that part also will be in doc. So that's why I am pointing out. So I beg apology for pointing out this thing, that the shortcoming of the linguists in transcription and analysis. So this may be taken care for improvement by the training of the existing expert linguists of universities, institution, and mostly by the experts of Central Institute of Indian Languages. So with all the mentioned above limitations, the WordGI is in the process of uploading around 500 mother tongues surveyed under Mother Tongue Survey of India projects. So measures of remedy: if language documentation is to be treated as the prime agenda for describing language structures as well as preservation of vocabulary and structure of linguistic community, pre-documentation orientation and training should be given to linguists, language consultants, informants, and to all involved in this documentation task in graded way. And that I told it can be possible by the experts of universities and institutions, and especially the experts of the Central Institute of Indian Languages, who worked in past, who are working now, and who will be working also in the field of linguistics. Other non-linguistic issues I am not discussing here. So I am restricting my points or problems within the measures of the remedy also within the linguistic part of. So now I am concluding that what I talked, the concluding remarks is this: language loss is a threat in the present day situation. When we lose, when we lose a language, we lose a culture. So vital it is to document as much as possible the oral tradition, the written tradition in digital mode equally. And the digital data also has to be digitized for documentation as a taken part for the, not only that oral tradition, written tradition, but also digitized stock also has to be taken for documentation. Equally important to produce linguistic description for academic purposes and for the community, for the welfare of the community. The purpose and goals of language documentation may vary from government to government, from institution to institution, but it is important to help the communities to revitalize their languages which are dying. The capacity building in terms of the trained linguists and other interested scholars of allied disciplines for contributing to language documentation should be done at a larger scale so that the projects undertaken can be completed successfully. So let us live for the languages, let us think for the languages of the India. Thank you all for listening with patience this submission and presentation. Thank you all. I remain here. So
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Professor Mukherjee, for your fantastic task. I must congratulate you, first of all, because we learned quite a bit about the operations of ORGI in language documentation efforts. You worked in two important institutions. So I think your talk has opened up several avenues for discussion. It was lovely to know the goals and the logistics and other issues involved in this documentation task of ORGI office. I am sure, like now after you left, now 6 years have passed and so many things are like whatever you pointed out, probably some of the problems would have been resolved. But I must say, out of all these people, I'm also one of the enlightened ones out of your talk. Thank you so much for this. Now let us open the talk for discussion. There are several questions in the chat box too, but before that, if anybody wants to ask a question directly.
नमस्ते दीदी, कल के दीदी मैं शिवराम कृष्ण बोल रहा हूँ.
हाँ, please tell.
And you have covered most of all the topics, all the areas you covered. That way of that how this disappearing of the Indian languages, the presentation is an excellent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
We will see some other. I will talk to you after some time. Just you can continue now.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, Dr. Patnaik. Sir, you have to unmute yourself. Dr. Patnaik, please unmute yourself. Your mic is off. I'm going to call him. Before that, if anyone wants to ask, please go ahead. Sir, you have to unmute yourself. He told somebody to go away.
Hey, technically, Kardo.
Yes, now we can hear you. Please repeat your question.
No, I don't have a question. I have a suggestion. The suggestion is that it has been very enlightening and excellent, very detailed discussion of documentation. But I think that other than documentation, what is more important, because documentation is preservation. Languages cannot be saved by preservation. Language can be saved only by use. Therefore, we must find an alternative of using the language, not merely documenting. So that aspect should be discussed. This is number one. Number two is that lot of talk was given about documentation and reservation. There is no mention of field work. There should be some mention of field work, particularly participant observation. Therefore, that is one of the major areas about which there should be some discussion. So I just have some suggestions, nothing more to add to this. We had at one time started a movement in India called demuseumization. This was done by one of the secretaries of the government of India, by the two major museums, one in Bhopal and one in Calcutta. So the whole idea was museum means only keeping things inside. But we thought that demuseumization means take the museum to the people. Similarly, documentation is merely preserving and keeping it. It doesn't save any language. It doesn't save multilingualism. It only gives material for study in future. Therefore, I think that we should give some thought to use of language rather than merely documentation. That's the only solution I had.
Thank you, Dr. Patnaik. It was a
Should I tell?
Yes, Professor Mukherjee, can you react?
Sir, thank you very much for pointing out or for your kind suggestion. I will try to make it reach to Registrar General Office. But the first thing you told that language cannot be saved. The entire this presentation, I talked that language laws can be saved. The languages can be saved from loss, from the threat. So language cannot be saved by documentation, but it is in some form and manner, it can be saved. That's the main thing. And regarding this thing, it is detailed of this language laws in detail, because you know this WordGI is not a this research oriented office. First of all, recently it has been, when at the time of my superannuation arrived, it is trying to take some dive towards research. But this WordGI is an administrative administrative part of the system. So that's why the detailed research methodology which one university, one institute can take, that detailed research methodology, what they cannot adopt, this time limit is not allowed to them. That's why within a short time tenure, so what people have to cover this data for the protection and preservation of the specimen. That's the main thing. And here also for Linguistic Survey of India, we have tried enough, not with the this living data or video data, but what is the usage of the particular language in different domains of the society, especially in the education, in the common market areas, in the common intercommunication, in the judiciary, in the literacy, in the education policy. There we try to cover the sociolinguistic part also under the Linguistic Survey of India project. This is the one part, sir, against your suggestion. So this is, I must add. And but the about the field work you talked about, this thing, this MTSI, this 19,569 raw returns was in 2011. And prior to that, it was more than 20,000 or something. So out of this world, so we rationalized some names. And it was the linguist of the Wardia was sent to the field, to the district census organization, to quick collection of the specimen, calling the particular language informant to identification. So there, the scope and working area is very limited to for a detailed field work as it is expected from a regular language researcher. So this is the limitation on the part of the WordGI. So with that limited infrastructure, with that limited time tenure, and with that limited objective, we have to work in the field work. That's why we may be losing the detailed field work in case of the present day linguistic survey of MTSI's project in the WordGI. Because MTSI is such a huge, people are involved. So to maintain them for a longer time in the field work, a huge fund is required. So WordGI has not that fund, as we are told, I am told. So this is the time limit stipulates the all possibilities of the research work. Sir, I submit very honestly in the matter. So this is my submission to answer you.
Whatever is being done is excellent. It is necessary, but it is not enough. That's all
true.
that I wanted to say.
Yes, true. Sir, it is not enough. It is true.
And it is important that you have greater collaboration with the CIL and identify universities which should develop linguistics so that as we are doing previously through summer schools and winter schools through the UGC, similarly there should be some coordination so that CIL and ORGI should have greater collaboration with UGC and identifying universities where linguistics could be studied.
Exactly, sir. Exactly, sir. But since I am superannuated, I am not limited by my speaking this thing allowed permission. So, but by Professor Shailendra Mohan and Professor Umarani has built this platform where it will be this delivered in the YouTube. So everybody will be listening, including our WordGI, because the invitation, so which Professor Umarani communicated to me that I passed to WordGI that I am going to talk on such and such topic. So that after taking this particular permission, then I am opening my mouth here that you know very well than any of us. So by this platform and by your whatever suggestion you like to improve the WordGI's language research, everybody will listen, and I specific cannot suggest anything. Your suggestion will be broadcasted in a broader manner. So I think WordGI will take a lesson of it. If time comes, if time allows, I will definitely make reach your suggestion to them. Sir, thank you very much. And it is good. It is really a very valuable suggestion you give to us. You gave to us. So I must carry out. I must carry out if, according to my possibility, according to the situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So there are related questions, and Mary Tout and Renuka Devi have echoed some of the issues put forward by Dr. Patnaik. So Mary Tout, would you like to interact directly, or should I read your message from the chat box? Mary? Mary Tout, are you there? Okay, I don't know whether she's there, but she has echoed almost the same points. The word rational is being used, but it seems like this classification process of mother tongues under umbrella language names is creating a political hierarchy of languages. That is exactly what causes language endangerment and loss. Isn't this hierarchy created by the official census that erases so many languages dismissed as mother tongues in the census that is leading to language loss?
That is true. The people outside WordGI, they'll be thinking in this way, this political hierarchy, because WordGI is working under the infrastructure of Government of India. So what is the goals and objectives of the Government of India that has to be carried out by the research staff of language? But because I told that whatever randomly we are describing the language structure, whatever we are randomly classifying, that is all not accepted. And Government of India views and looks and goes deep into all the works done by the linguists, language researcher of WordGI. And the extent the Government of India likes that part is brought into the public domain. In that case, it may appear it is a political hierarchy because we are working, but we, being one of the language researchers of the WordGI, I submit and surrender. We are helpless in this issue. Mary, I appreciate your question, but I cannot satisfy you being a part of Government of India, especially of WordGI, which Patnaiks are very knows in under which stipulation we are working, that you are not allowed to divulge this thing, what are not allowed to sensitize the situation. So all these limitations we are working. So I admit your question, but I am not satisfied. My answer may not be satisfactory to you, but this is the fact that we are working under limited infrastructure.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Another question by her, which you have, I think it's the same what Professor Patnaik was asking. What is the use of documentation if no language maintenance is also practiced? Since we already discussed this, you don't have to react to that. Yes, we all agree that we need to take care of language maintenance, revitalization efforts, and other issues, because as Professor Mukherjee already pointed out, ORGI's task is in language documentation. So it is our job, the rest of us who are responsible to probably undertake additional projects on language revitalization or other social linguistic projects where we can give back to the community and help them use the language in several aspects so that we can prevent language loss as much as possible. Since this point was already discussed, I would like to move on to the next, because there are several queries that shows that your lecture is very interesting. Again, how much responsibility does the official census have with causing language equal to mother tongue loss? I think it's again a political question which you had already covered in your answer, because do you want to respond to that again? Very brief response. How much responsibility does the official census have with causing language equal to mother tongue loss?
Language is not equal to mother tongue. Mother tongue is exclusive and language is inclusive. That is the main question. That is the single line reply. This mother tongue is have no umbrella over it. But one mother tongue is having one definite linguistic structure. But several mother tongues with their individual language structures that can be comparable and that can be clubbed under one umbrella and which compose a language umbrella. So that's why we call census the mother tongue grouped under languages. So this is the one line answer. Mother tongue is exclusive and language is inclusive. This is the question, answer.
Thank you for that. From the same person, several questions and comments are there, but one last thing I would like to ask from Mary Thout's question is, isn't elicitation the least reliable technique of language data collections, especially when in official settings where speakers' mother tongues have been dismissed as less worthy than official languages? So one answer, part of this answer was already discussed in the dialogue between you and Dr. Patnaik, where he mentioned participatory observation and other techniques should also be used. But I think that is again I think I can answer this question on behalf of Dr. Mukherjee. They have their own limitations in methodology. She has been pointing it out. And since they have time constraint and their methodologies are different and the purpose of the language documentation of theirs is different from what the rest of us are doing, that is also important. So I think we all agree, of course, elicitation is not the only technique.
Let me add one point, Professor Umarani. That is the thing that Warjai people are identifying that language name with a structure and comparing that structure, they are identifying a language umbrella. But if it appears that anything appearing wrong, it is always open to the linguist to point out and to bring into the public or that this is the census classification which we are not agreeing, because we are developing our classification, as I told, linguistic principle and methodology as well as the existing knowledge base. So if you create a knowledge base asking the genuinity of the classification, no problem. Then the next time rationalization will take care of your classification. So there is no end of classification. It is not that what the linguists are doing, that there ends the area. It is not like that. It's a minimum identification with minimum structure and minimum comparison. We are trying to give an umbrella shape of this 20,000 language returns during census enumeration, in decennial census enumeration. So you have to keep this thing. So we have to keep a pocket. We have to prepare a pocket base. So you are always welcome to refute or to discuss or to point out the limitation of the classification. There is no problem. Nobody is obstructing that. And once your classification, it is agreed by everybody, that knowledge base will be taking into consideration while next census will be coming for rationalization and classification. This is, I want to add. Professor Umarani, you continue, please.
Thank you. I think you gave a wonderful answer. So there is another question from Dr. Nanda Kumar. What happens to sub-language, that is the language that are divided because of caste and are not recognized and losing its identity? How can they be saved?
Actually, the question is the WordGI does not derive data, this cross data, language versus caste data is not there. For the data world is only mother tongue. And the processes data is language and mother tongue. So the caste-based language and other thing, we are limited to answer this question because this is not the area of WordGI language census task so far. It may be in future, but so far this cross-tabulation, caste and language has not taken place. Once it will take place, it will be discussed and it will be taken care of your question. It is nice.
Mary Tout, I don't know why you are not able to speak, but you're putting in the chat box. So she has asked one more clarification. Do I understand correctly then that it is only languages that are valuable and that mother tongue loss isn't a problem. Mother tongue loss is acceptable.
Actually, language and mother tongue, basically they are coterminous. It is not that this mother tongue is also having all the qualities of languages. So from the mother tongue concept, we arrive to the language concept. So language means mother tongue also, because mother tongue, we have to work on the census definition of the mother tongue. The languages of the mother tongue is not that as we think of it. So you have to consider that also. Hello, Uma. Hi.
Yes, so that's nice. But look, any other questions or comments from others?
I come in quickly, ma'am.
Yeah, Pautan.
Okay, thanks, madam, for that exhaustive, detailed discussion. I benefited a lot from your presentation. I have a very quick, what I call, not question, but clarification of the sort. So there is a defect of what you call this questionnaires, because working with your organization to a large extent carried out your research work with all the limitations that you ascribe with questionnaires. So the questionnaires, as you pointed out, is prepared in advance and circulated to the community for data collection. As you rightly mentioned, some of the terms, concepts may not be available in that language. So
Yes.
the concept of sea that is rich in what you call Dravidian languages who live near the seashore may not be available in what you call hilllands or in the uplands. So one has to really understand the what you call the culture, the setting, the topography, the fauna, flora. So many of these words which are endemic to these regions. So one really requires what you call that the knowledge of the field. Somebody who really knows about the field, and questionnaire has that limitation because questionnaire is meant for all region and all. So my proposal is that we have separate questionnaires, or even if at all we are going to work with limited resources and with questionnaire, we should prepare questionnaire based on the regions. Like for example, hill regions, the fauna, flora, because they have all sorts of flora, and we have more than 100 varieties of bamboos and what you call grass and so on and so forth. So if you can make such questionnaire, then some of these what you call highly endangered cultural stuff can be somehow brought into the documentation process. Thank you.
Sir, very nice. Your question is very useful and very interesting also. But as I told, the answer will be the same. Our object and goal is limited. Our questionnaire is also limited. But the thing which is not, because for the limited objective and goal, and very quickly we have to rationalize all these 20,000 names returned, or more than 20,000 names returned. So for this, we have to work very quickly. So we cannot prepare community-wise different type of questionnaire. A single questionnaire we devise, and the single questionnaire is circulated to the community people for giving the data. So the problem is the concept which does not belong to that community. No problem. We don't bother. Forcefully, we should not give the data. If that concept is not within this community, then it should be kept blank. The other items will be enough for giving the language structure. So questionnaire, but the detailed questionnaire community-wise, that is the duty. It is open to all language researchers who are working with the university UGC infrastructure. It is open to them. But our work is too limited to this point. We just bringing out the treasury of language, treasury of languages and mother tongue world, treasury of the language mother tongue worlds. That's how, along with the limitation of the objective and goal and scope, so our questionnaire is also limited. It is not exhaustive. So it is open to you all to expand, to spread the studies, to increase the study level. So there is no harm. Wordjake is not there to stop. They will encourage rather your study, your effort, your endeavor, so that this will affect our this language rationalization. Your work, the researchers' work will calibrate the language rationalization and classification of census returns, of mother tongue returns. It is right. It is open to all language researchers attached with universities and institutions.
Thank you. So any other queries, comments, or feedback? Yes, Professor Rangan.
Uma, this is a very orderly presentation and a very nice. You have given a very guidelines for those people who are taking this endangerment of language analysis. This is not directly concerned with you, but your materials will be very good input to the activities of language revitalization, because it may be used for many purposes. I see there are two components in this one. One is the document, and another is the same person has to play the role of social activist, that is to revitalizing the language. So in that, from that point of view, this is a very good input to that second part of that work. There are two things I want to say, not directly to your things, on the other side. One is in the language community, there is a process of revitalization of a language, the mechanism of revitalization. If someone observes, you can find out. For example, at least I can say, the girls, when they lose their language, at least I have observed in the Telugu community, when they lose their language, after the marriage, they get back the language. That is, once they get married and that community is that way, then they get the language. So there is a mechanism of getting back that, revitalizing the language also. And Professor Jnanasundaram also, I think, he said that in Andaman, there is a community, I don't know the details. When that youngsters are trained for hunting, even if they have lost the language, they learn the language during that period. So in a community, there may. So those who are interested in that one, we can see those mechanisms and whether we can promote those kind of things. One. And the second one is we should create resource persons from the same community. For example, especially in the schools. Recently, I read an article about the tribals in our Ooty. There, the Tamil is taught there. That is not useful for a tribal community when they are isolated. So, when there is a attempt to teach their language, the Tamils cannot help that one. So, from their community, the people must be trained and as teachers, so that for the first 2 years or 3 years in the schools, preschool or whatever it may you call, there that materials can be used. Your documentation will be very useful in those places to have your textbooks or the dictionaries or whatever it may be. Those materials may be used and the language may be used. So that
Yes,
way,
sir.
as Professor Patnaik said, the language use is also another important domain. So in that way, we have to create more resources from the same community and must be involved in that one, so that they will be Englishing the language. So these two are came to my mind. Just I want to convey it to you. Thank you very much for the very elaborate and orderly presentation. Very congratulations to you.
Thank you for your appreciation too.
Thank
And this is the way revitalization, it also we directly face, because our friend, that our own researcher, you must be knowing his name, Dr. R. Nakirar. So
Yes.
he worked on this thing, Gurung language in Sikkim. So when he first time went to the field, so no Gurung data, all Hindi data. So a second time, when he went to check the data with other informant, by this time they have been accustomed with the wave of the revitalization that their languages has to be given special importance by the government of Sikkim, and they started learning their languages from the old generation. And the second time, when Dr. Nakiran went to collect or compare the Gurung data, tremendously beautifully, he got the entire Gurung data. Whether in the first slot, he did not get it. So in that way, this revitalization helps. While we language essential people, we go to the field. This is a true. And now, as you told, that in the school levels for revitalization, that the documentation data will be useful. Now you are seeing, listening every day in the Russia and Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, they forgot their own language. They are managing the entire world with Russian. But now under the pressure, they are now learning the Ukraine language, and people are started forcibly, mechanically, motivatedly, they are starting using this Ukrainian language. So this is also the language example of revitalization in the current world affair. We have drawn this example. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, both of you. So Sneha Gupta, what's your question?
Uh, Thank you, Mama, for the opportunity. I would rather like to just provide my side of perspective or understanding what I've understood by what Dr. Patnaik has said, that the museums which are having all the collectibles from the heritage of past from all across the world, it's not just to keep that in the museum, but to make people understand that how it functions and what is the importance of those um, items, right? Because some of them are not practically useful in the current world. And fortunately, I was able to witness the same thing in Mumbai in CSMVS Museum, where they have created an opportunity and platform to make the children understand that how this practical thing were happening. Like in the coin section, they have created a small a technological instrument where children are able to press the coin by themselves, or at the clothes collection, they have made a point that children are able to do the hand block printing by themselves. So same thing, if it could be done for languages, that would be wonderful, because I believe in the current scenario where most of the children are pressurized to go for the English medium schools, they are not able to even give value to their own mother tongue. Forget about the regional or the endangered languages. Like the basic vernacular language also is not being used at the school level. So to make them aware about the language spoken in and around their area through any kind of such activities, that would be really wonderful.
It is. I appreciate your this approach. This is right, but I have already mentioned in my slides that there is one archive, the server. We upload the output of both the surveys. We upload in a server. This WordGI is having one server. It is not like museum, but once you click this language, that language, the data will be automatically coming to you. So you have to approach this Office of the Registrar General to have access for that server. So I am not able to, I am having the data, but I am limited by my power to show that thing. That if Professor Umarani can show it, I don't know. So here, very well wise, this a Mohan language in Manipur, that sky, the earth, water is told in this Manipuri Mayan language. So that is given And not only one time, the 3 times it has been uttered by the language informant that raw data has been given, uploaded in the archive, in the server. So once you are interested, you can approach, you can have access, you will be given some ID. With that ID, you will be accessing, and by this, it will be working like museum, that you want to listen that Andaman is, or you want to listen that this Tamil. So it will be switching here and there. If the child is interested, that they can go through it, and that archival will be the answer to your approach. I think so. So that archive is there. We have Wadhyay has developed this archive, and it is all this raw data and the process data are this thing uploaded in that server, that lsi.gov.in server.
All right. Thank you.
So
Thank you very much, ma'am.
after my retirement, I don't know the status, whether they have changed the servers names or not. But Government of India people are this limited in this way. But it is pakka that it is true, it is a fact that there is a server, there is an archive, there every day this raw data is getting loaded. They are interested people, and by another 2-3 years, it will be a complete full-fledged archive.
Okay.
So you may have access to that archive if you are really interested in different languages of India. And I
Sure.
appreciate your approach. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we are running out of time. One last question from Tenarasu. Can you please talk? Can you speak? Tenarasu? I don't know whether he's there, but he has put his question in the chat box. What is the basic criteria you follow to consider it a separate language? I mean, what is the criteria in classifying languages?
Languages.
Yeah, what?
Considering for separate language.
Yes.
Separate language means language. It will be having its in contiguous areas in the same district, within the same state. It will be having its different varieties. When a language can show its different shades, its different aerial features by the contribution or addition of different mother tongues, sharing similar linguistic features, similar phonological features, then we can call that group of mother tongues under a particular language name. And in that case, we can differentiate one language from the other language. So a world of varieties with variant grammatical structure, phonological structure, and syntactic structure, which is composed by several mother tongues in a same area or in a contiguous areas, we can arrive at a separate languages. It is not our mechanism, it is the mechanism of the various shades of a single language. So language, we are putting a separate language, that is the linguist contribution, but to examine the different variants and using of the different variants of the same language, it is the uniqueness, it is the unique feature of the language mother tongue speakers, which they create by their effort, by their diversity, they create a different language. The linguist of the Wadhyay, they cannot create a separate language. That's the thing.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions, Professor Shailendra Mohan, are you there? You want to say anything? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful talk on understanding the view of language from Indian census person. And especially regarding that, I wanted to ask that how do you come to these rationalized ones, though you have already answered those limitations of those questions. It's a very unique way of understanding whether geography is a one criteria or whether linguistics is a one criteria that can help us understanding these groupings of languages and mother tongues. Perhaps, yeah, next time we'll be in a position to understand this. Thank you very much for your talk, ma'am.
I'm obliged.
Even the mother tongue language survey was something like a very interesting one, and that things have been published online. So that will help us even understanding the language structures better.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Kakali Mukherjee. Though I
Thank
have so
you to
many
all
other
of you.
things to talk to you, but I've been discussing with you over almost a decade now. We will, since the time is running out, I'm not going to ask you any questions right away. But I must thank you on behalf of our institute and on behalf of my director and myself for taking your valuable time and being with us today. I also take this opportunity to thank our founder director, Professor Devi Prasanna Patnaik, who sat with us patiently from 11 o'clock. And I think he's still there, but we cannot see his screen. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us and for encouraging us always. And it was wonderful to have Professor Rangan and many other people, Professor Pautang Hokke, many people, and my dear colleagues of CIL and other places in India and outside. So we are really thankful to all of you for being with us during the last almost 3 hours now. Thank you once again. Thank you, Professor Mukherjee. Do you want to say any last word before we close the session?
I also feeling very much elevated because this work really I must express, I must thank to first to CI Institute as well as Professor Umaran and Professor Endangerment, because I have worked, I am going on producing something, but I have never got such a platform to speak consolidatedly. That's what I have done. It is not the word GI. It is what I have seen word GI, what work I have done word GI, so that I got a platform to share with such eminent linguists, stalwarts, intellectuals of the country. That is my pleasure, and I am obliged by that, by both of I am obliged to both of you and to the entire Central Institute of Indian Languages and to WordGI and to all my colleagues at CIL, to all my colleagues here and all my seniors who are listening, tolerating me rather with my this voice, this speech and this language. They are tolerating me. So I am obliged. I am feeling elevated. I will look forward to be with you in future also, because I started my career with you only, and now it is the opportunity has come to me to be with you. I look forward to be with you ever and ever. So this is my last word. Thank you.
So thank you once again, Professor Kakali, and all of you for being with us. So I would like to say Dhanyavad, Vanakkam to everyone.
Vanakkam.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So we finished before time.
We took extra 24 minutes, but that was wonderful.
Okay. Nice, Uma, nice. I'll be talking to you.
Yeah, see, I stopped recording because, it was nice to have you, and it was nice. There's so many people interacting, so that was nice. So we will be in touch, and I thank you once again. See you. The talk was wonderful. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye.